Welcome to the Propeller Club of Northern California. I'm Stas Margaronis, and we are celebrating Maritime Day 2 for us. Maritime Day 1 was about export strategies, and we have the Deputy Administrator from the Maritime Administration, Bill Papey, here today. He's in Kansas City, and he will be speaking to us shortly. I wanted to do a couple of brief introductions. We've got a couple of people here that I wanted to just recognize. My interns, Kevin Policarpo and Natalie Ruffner. Hi, Kevin. They helped with a video that we are going to show, which celebrates the Jones Act. And I see, let me just get, Marjorie is in. Marjorie, we still can't see you. Okay, we can see you now. So, and Nick Salona, good morning, sir. I see you there. And my good friend, we have a friend of mine, Hans Karlstam, the distinguished naval architect from Northern Holland, an expert on Dutch, German, and Chinese shipbuilding is with us today. And Hans is in the Netherlands, and he stayed up to past his bedtime to be with us today. So thank you very much for that, Hans. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is, I think we should start the video. Todd, can you do that?
Yep.
Hold on a second. Let me just make sure. I think we did share the screen. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this should be it. Oh, wait a minute. Let me. Okay.
The Jones Act, or the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, supports new maritime technologies and jobs. According to the American Waterways Operators, 650,000 Americans are employed in Jones Act-related industries. Many of these jobs would have been outsourced abroad without the Jones Act. This is because the Jones Act mandates that vessels transporting waterborne cargoes between U.S. ports must be U.S. manned, built, and U.S. owned. These Jones Act vessels include ocean-going container ships and tugs or barges that transport freight along our coasts and inland waterways. So the Jones Act makes sure that U.S. mariners operate these vessels. This historic act also supports American companies and workers who build and operate next-generation hybrid and zero-emission ferries, platform supply vessels, and even battery-powered floating classrooms. The Jones Act also supports the shipyards and workers that build these ships, ferries, tugs, and floating classrooms. U.S. shipyards also build military sealift ships that transport military hardware to war zones. U.S. shipbuilders are also constructing new national security multi-mission vessels, or NSM-MVs. These new ships will not only train cadets in deck and engine room operations, and also provide emergency services support. As innovation is given the opportunity to flourish and national security is safeguarded, the Jones Act serves as a beacon for the United States.
Okay, thank you very much, Todd. Aaron Stokes, I'm not sure he's here, but he was one of my co-producer on this, along with Kevin, who did a lot of the research. I want to thank all of the companies who participated with their photos. And Mr. Presti, I hope you saw your a cameo appearance there. I think you're going to become a national image by the end of the day because this thing is going to go viral. So, and thank you, Seafarers. We had a number of photos, and Mr. Marrone, thank you very much for all of your help. We had those photos were great, and they really showed a lot of our younger people, which I think we really wanted to focus. And we also wanted to talk about the zero emission and low emission capacities of new vessels that are coming into the market. So thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Pasha. We had several photos of Pasha and Ed, I'm going to ask you about where our ship is when we get into the questions, but we'll hold that one up for a few minutes. Let me now introduce the president of the International Propeller Club, Niels Aalund, who is the senior vice president of the West Gulf Maritime Association, who has been a very good friend of this club, has provided excellent leadership to the Propeller Club nationally. And thank you very much, Niels, for being here, and welcome.
Thank you, Stas. And that was a very impressive video we just saw. And speaking of going viral, would you please, with your permission, I'd like to get a copy of that link, and perhaps we could put it on our website for that video and circulate it in our newsletter. Once again, Stas, I'm so impressed with you and your team. You always put together first-class presentations, and it's just well done. I look at the VIP lineup, just another first-class event. Well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As International President of the Propeller Club, it is my privilege to welcome you here today, all of you virtually. The Propeller Club and our industry colleagues, everybody on this virtual meeting has been impacted by COVID, the pandemic. I remain impressed with our ability to rise to the occasion. Commerce has moved brown water, blue water, despite the challenges. Basically, we suit up and show up. We find a way of getting the commerce done. And that comes on the eve of National Maritime Day, May 22nd, which will be celebrated officially tomorrow. But each year since 1933, our country celebrates National Maritime Day. We have the world's largest economy, strong ties with our trading partners all over the world. We support our military forces by moving ships, supplies, products where they go. We have indeed a rich maritime heritage, and the Jones Act supports that. Each year, in particular, propeller clubs have made it a practice of holding ceremonies and celebrations throughout our country to recognize National Maritime Day. With it falling on Saturday, I know that during the week that was done, I attended one event in person, a wreath laying, and then others were done virtually as International President. It's a time for us to reflect on the past, the sacrifices made, the heroic efforts, the losses sustained, and to give thanks for the present. We all know the tremendous impact our country receives from maritime commerce. Just about every product, volume-wise, moves by water. Certainly there's air and trucking, rail, but with commerce, the volume, most of the cargo, volume-wise, moves by ocean, brown water, etc. Our propeller clubs benefit from forums like this, Stas. Well done. Thanks for all you do. And thanks for people on this line, on this virtual meeting. Thanks what you do to keep commerce moving. Let's take time to reflect on National Maritime Day. I do have a special request for everyone. Please do make it a point to talk to young people and encourage them to consider a career in our industry. They will be the future pipeline for our workers. They'll be the next generation and the generation after that that ensures that America becomes and remains the #1 trading partner, and we maintain our maritime heritage. And with that, please enjoy this special forum, be safe, and have a great weekend. Thank you, Stas.
Niels, thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership and support and all the good work that you do that helps us keep going and helps the Propeller Club stay active around the United States and around the world. I want to now introduce our keynote speaker, but before I do that, I have to just remember to thank our 2 sponsors. We have the Port of San Francisco and an anonymous donor, and they both have supported us, and we appreciate that very much. I also want to just make one note, which is that yesterday we had our export strategies session, and there was discussion from John Lee and Evie Wong about the problems that exporters are facing and whether we need to consider increasing our efforts and support for building Jones Act ships to develop export capacity in the Far East and Europe and around the world. And I know that if we had had that discussion a couple of years ago, everybody would have said that I or anybody who's suggesting that were slightly out of it. But this year we have seen some real problems that exporters have faced, and the problem that we have to address when the predominant ocean carrying business is in foreign flag hands, and we, the United States, are not in the game. And maybe it's time that we consider getting back into the game. And I've sent a couple of notes to Bill, and I'm sure he'll be addressing those. Bill Papey is the senior executive. A member of the senior executive service before he became associate administrator for ports and waterways on June 7th, 2020. In this capacity, Mr. Papey directs a national port infrastructure modernization program in excess of $2 billion. Discretionary grant programs and other programs managed by him include Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, Infrastructure for Rebuilding America, Port Infrastructure Development, America's Marine Highway, and Deepwater Port Licensing and Port Conveyance. Bill, I understand you're in Kansas City this morning, and welcome to the Propeller Club.
Thanks, Stas. Close. I'm actually on the other end over in St. Louis, but
oh, sorry, forgot. Okay.
No worries. I'm in America's heartland. So good morning to all, and thanks to Stan Margaronis and everybody at the Propeller Club of Northern California for inviting me to join you today. Great video, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to celebrate Maritime Day with you, if only by video conference, and to share how the Maritime Administration is helping our industry set a course for the future. I also bring greetings of U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. We couldn't have a better champion of U.S. maritime than Secretary Buttigieg, and his leadership comes at a crucial time for our industry. He passes along his gratitude to the Propeller Club for its outstanding advocacy for the U.S. maritime industry. National Maritime Day is a moment to reflect on our industry's heritage and to look toward its future. From the historic steam-powered voyage of the Savannah to the massive vessels that power global commerce today, our industry affects the lives of Americans every day. There's never been more true than over the last 15 months. COVID-19 hit us all hard, but the maritime industry came shining through because of men and women who made sure cargoes kept moving and store shelves remained stocked. Whether at sea or ashore, at ports or in shipyards, our people displayed their patriotism and work ethic. That spirit and effort largely go unseen by those outside the industry, but a lot more people than usual noticed. We certainly did at the Maritime Administration, and we are grateful. We owe to those men and women and to the Americans who rely on their efforts to keep the U.S. maritime industry growing and strong. At the Maritime Administration, we're making strategic investments to ensure that the future is one of growth and advancement. This year in particular, we're hearing a lot about infrastructure and reinvesting in American workers for jobs and growth. The president has stated that his jobs package will deliver significant resources, not just for roads and bridges, but a $17 billion investment in our inland waterways and ports. While the president and Congress do their part, the Maritime Administration is advancing its efforts across existing grant programs that strengthen ports, inland waterways, and small shipyards. Last year, we delivered nearly $1 billion in grants to support projects at dozens of ports across the country to facilitate the safe and efficient movement of cargoes and strengthen our economy. We recently announced that another $220 million is now available. Applications close on July 31st. Late last month, we announced nearly $20 million in grants for 31 small shipyards to help them grow, hire, and become more competitive. We're advancing the cause of marine highways as alternatives to our overcrowded roads. Last summer, another nearly $10 million went out to support a variety of projects. And since 2016, the Maritime Administration has provided $33.8 million in grants through the program. We've also made significant improvements in the federal ship financing program, Title 11, to provide attractive financing options for building new or modernizing existing vessels. So yes, the maritime industry is American infrastructure and critical infrastructure at that. As we've seen over the last year and a half, disruptions in our global supply chain reverberate, affecting lives and livelihoods. How we invest in our industry matters for the U.S. global competitiveness and for our security. Policies matter too. The Maritime Administration remains committed to the three tentpole policies that support our industry: the Marine Security Program, Cargo Preference, and the Jones Act. MSP is an economic and national security necessity, and it's a good deal for us and for the 60-year-old ships. For that $5 million stipend, we get assured access to sea lift vessels, and that $5 million helps keep those ship owners competitive in the very tough international market. Similarly, cargo preference statutes ensure that much of U.S. government cargoes move on U.S. ships. No nation would wisely entrust the movement of military cargoes to another, and non-military cargoes funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars should move on vessels owned and operated by Americans. Many would like to see more than 50% for non-military cargo. Finally, as you know, the Jones Act simply says the ships involved in domestic commerce carrying our goods for our country must be U.S. built, U.S. owned, U.S. flagged, and crewed by U.S. mariners. While often discussed in terms of economics and trade, the Jones Act is primarily about defense and security. It helps protect our country, its shipbuilding capacity, and the pool of trained mariners we require. That's one reason why 80% of countries have similar laws. The Jones Act helps support more than 125 shipyard and repair facilities, as well as 100 large ocean-going ships, 1,800 offshore vessels, and roughly another 39,000 smaller vessels in our domestic service, all built and repaired by American workers with a collective 73.8 million tons of cargo capacity. It's an American jobs machine, resulting in $54 billion in U.S. economic output and supporting the employment of nearly 650,000 Americans, as was referenced in your video. The Jones Act remains essential for Americans' national and economic security. This Maritime Day, as we look to the future, I can think of no better example of the Maritime Administration's commitment to a strong and growing U.S. maritime industry than the National Multi-Mission Vessel. American-made, purpose-built, a state-of-the-art trading platform for the men and women who will largely sail and maintain commercial vessels that keep our country strong. 4 vessels have been authorized. The first is already under construction, and the president's budget requests funding for the 5th vessel, which will be destined for Cal Maritime, where it will replace the Golden Bear. We have appointed, of interest for you, a new gateway director for the Mid-Pacific Gateway Office in California. Gus Hine starts on Monday in Long Beach and will be a great asset to our Office of Maritime and Intermodal Outreach. He is well known in the port and maritime circles in California, and we expect he will do great things. On our country's 88th Maritime Day, we have a lot to celebrate. A strong maritime industry whose people weathered the storm of a global pandemic, who persevere through new challenges, and who keep our country moving in the right direction. A direction of growth and technological advances, investments in mariners, and investments in the economic and national security of America. Challenges remain, but just as we've shown in the past 15 months, our industry is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. That's thanks to you and the men and women across America who put their hearts and souls into the industry that we all love. Thank you for having me present today.
Bill, thank you very much for your remarks, and it's really heartening to hear that so much is going on, and we recognize the maritime industry is a key element in U.S. infrastructure, and it is very, very good that we are having the initiatives that you've described. We'll keep the questions to the end after we go through our panel, and if you do have questions, we'll try and get them at the end. I now want to go to our panel, and the first panelist is Marjorie Zoretic, who is the Director of Business Development and Government Affairs at Foss Maritime. And Marjorie, I believe you are in Jacksonville.
Says unmute. Okay, that's right. I'm here in Florida. Happy to be with you on the coast today, and I apologize for my video. Somehow I got flipped, and I haven't quite figured out how to flip it back. But hopefully the presentation is what you focus on anyway. Like I said, it's an honor to be with you today. I work for Foss Maritime, and I'm focusing on two main focus areas to share with you, as there's a lot of increased interest in the wind industry and in alternative fuels, especially for us as Jones Act carriers. And I thought I'd just try to bring the audience up to speed some with those areas. Let's see if I can get the next slide to go. There we go. We've recently had some reorganization at Foss, so I wanted to bring these faces in front of you. We have our new president, Will Roberts, formerly our COO, Paul Gallagher, who's been with Foss for ages, and he's our VP of Business Development. He's the lead for our vertical and offshore wind. And then Jeff Horse, who many of you probably know as well, has been with Foss for a very long time and focuses heavily on our harbor services, sales components. And then this is our full operations and commercial leadership team. And like I said, most of you have probably recognized some of these faces, but if you want to take a moment to look for someone in your area, in Northern California, you've got Dan Edelston. In Southern California, there's Carrie Dill. And then recently, Henry Palmer has been placed as the general manager of all of California. And here's an overview of SALTCHUK's family of companies. And you can see another major Jones Act carrier, Tote Maritime, is one of our sister companies. Jones Act's extremely important to them. And obviously they are engaged with the NSMVs and proud to be a part of that project mentioned earlier. Foss now falls under the SALTCHUK Marine umbrella. And you can see here our full family of brands under SALTCHUK Marine. This reorganization is very exciting. It allows for us to serve our customers across all our brands more effectively. And pleased to bring you guys up to speed on that. And I was asked to talk briefly about how COVID-19 impacted Foss. And like most other Jones Act carriers, we experienced a downturn with COVID-19. And but we've been fortunate in that it's the capacities are starting to pick back up in the ports. We've been very busy. And so, yes, we've been impacted, as has everybody else, but we've also had quite a few continuous improvement projects over the past year that have really helped offset that that decrease in busyness in our ports. But I want to highlight our Fleet Monitoring Center, because the Fleet Monitoring Center at Foss, located in Oregon, is really on the Columbia Snake River, is really was a fantastic resource for us during COVID-19. We use them all the time for hurricane, for crewing, for dispatch. And during COVID-19, as we ramped up and in response to it, the Fleet Monitoring Center organized quite a few of our calls. They made sure that there was a common platform for policies across different regions to be shared. And I'm proud to say that our president, Will Roberts, had fantastic foresight in the early days of COVID, before it had really impacted the West Coast, and was already having all the general managers reviewing their contingency plans for all purposes, including pandemic. So we really felt like we were ahead of the ball the entire time, and the Fleet Monitoring Center was something that really helped us support that. At Foss Maritime, obviously most of our operations focused on the West Coast, but we have for decades been relied upon for complicated commercial project moves all over the world, including overseas in Russia, up and down the East Coast, all over the world, really. And that's helped us position ourselves to engage with the wind industry, which I'll talk about a bit more here. Again, Northern California, these are our lines of business that you're all hopefully familiar with Foss Maritime operating active on the West Coast. And about 10 years ago, Paul Gallagher, who's our Vice President of Business Development, started becoming engaged with the offshore wind industry and paying attention to what was going on in Europe, and started building those relationships. And you know, there was a kick up in interest about 10 years ago. That fell off as the oil price dropped, and now there's significant momentum behind offshore wind. And due to those relationships being built a decade ago, Foss is well positioned to support that work. So why wind, and why are we seeing so much activity on the East Coast? Well, if you look at this on the right, you can see where the wind capabilities are, and they're mostly on the East Coast in terms of being able to have shallow water and get off the coast and have a high velocity of wind, especially up in the Northeast. Consistent and high velocity wind has allowed for this area to be targeted as some of the best efficiencies for generating offshore wind capabilities. And on the left-hand side, you can see all of the active leases on the East Coast. Right now there's 17 active leases and 14 have been submitted for construction and operations plans. And you'll notice most of these are offshore of major population centers like New York City, Boston, Washington, DC. And most leases are at least 15 miles offshore, and that allows it to be out of sight from the beaches. How big are these turbines? This gives you a good idea. That first picture, you saw land-based turbines on a barge on the Columbia Snake River, on a Foss barge on the Columbia Snake River. Those can be transported by barge and but also over the road. But as you get up into these larger turbines, there's really no way they can be transported over land. You've got to have the waterfront resources to support this construction. Oh, let me go back one more. So just to give you an idea, for the Vineyard 1 project, there's the turbines are 450 feet high, and yeah, larger than a football field there, pretty large. So what about offshore wind on the West Coast? This is the audience here is mostly focused on the West Coast. Well, there's certainly a potential for wind industry to take off on the West Coast. But we see that it's going to be a bit more complicated than on the East Coast, and that's mostly due to the depth of water dropping off very quickly on the West Coast. So on the left-hand side, you see the monopile. Those are more simple construction, easier to install, and will be found on the East Coast. And then on the right-hand side, the semi-submersibles are more complicated. They're more expensive, and we're probably about the thought was there would be a 10-year lag between the East Coast and the West Coast, but with the current administration, there's definitely optimism that this will occur more quickly. And then what opportunities are there for Jones Act carriers in the wind industry? These are some examples of vessels that support the wind industry. We have to have cable laying, foundations, scour protection, and turbine installation. And also, once these wind leases are developed, you're going to need 40 to 60 technicians in the wind park most of the time just to manage the operational maintenance. The second area to touch on for this audience is alternative fuels. And I have a quote here from the Biden administration that came out from a White House fact sheet. It said, reducing emissions from international shipping. The international shipping sector contributes approximately 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. The sector's emissions are only projected to increase. In support of global efforts to keep within reach of a 1.5 degree Celsius limit on global average temperature increase, and in support of global efforts to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions no later than 2050, the United States is committed to working with countries in the International Maritime Organization to adapt a goal of achieving emissions from international shipping by 2050, and to adopt ambitious measures that will place the sector on a pathway to achieve this goal. And that came directly from the White House. And we can expect that in June, the U.S. Coast Guard is sending senior staff to the IMO's Marine and Environmental Protection Committee and the International Maritime Organization's intersectional working group on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So this has become a hot topic again, and as it has been in the last 5 years. So I wanted to just briefly make sure the audience was familiar with the different alternative fuel options that are available in the market, and why there's discussion about what should be done in the maritime industry. And this graph is probably the best representation of how there has to be a fundamental shift of alternative fuels based on regional resources and operational scope of the vessels. So right here we've got in the top right you have HFO and MGO, and then as you progress to the lower density fuels, you have LNG, and then over here you have liquid hydrogen to the left. And so LNG has really been a focal point across industry as one of the easiest and first transition fuels to a lower greenhouse emissions. There's also been a lot of talk of batteries, and for one, Foss has looked at fully electric tugs, but due to the endurance capabilities needed for our harbor services, full battery opportunities are just not a fit for us at this time. Also, we have to look at where the fuel is coming from originally. So ammonia is both ammonia, hydrogen, LNG, methanol. Many of these alternative fuels are sometimes majority rooted in fossil fuels, so they have to be formulated from renewable resources like wind energy in order to be carbon neutral. And so LNG has that capability, and so does ammonia. But as we see with the density profile of LNG as compared to quite a few of the others, LNG still seems to be out in the lead. And bio LNG as a very reasonable carbon neutral and zero carbon option. I think I'm going a little too long, so I'll try to speed up. Foss Maritime oversaw the construction of the Clean Jacksonville barge here in Jacksonville, Florida. We also initiated operations for this barge in Jacksonville, Florida. This was the first LNG bunker barge in North America. And we're proud of our engagement in this project, and it's really helped us expand our scope and understand alternative fuels and the greenhouse gas solutions for our customers moving forward. And then I wanted to also make everyone aware that Foss has already started using biofuel in operation. And this is a picture of the Alta June in Northern California. And also the Keegan Foss has loaded biofuel recently. And biofuel is a carbon, theoretically carbon neutral option. Obviously, there's a lot of processing that has to go between the original source and the supply, but this is a very good option in terms of energy density for Foss vessels. So that's what I had to share with all of you today, and a happy Maritime Day to the audience, and thank you for your time and attention. Oh, I have one more thing, sorry. One more thing, there's a new nonprofit called Port Vision 50 that's going to launch on June 1st. Keep an eye out for it. This is going to be a platform to inform local ports and stakeholders in the greenhouse gas strategy for the International Maritime Organization and how those are being implemented across the country. So look out for Port Vision 50 coming in June.
Marjorie, thank you very much for your presentation. And as I said to everybody, if we can just hold the questions until the end. Our next speaker is Ed Washburn, who returns for a second performance. Ed is the Senior Vice President, Fleet Operations for Pasha Group. Ed, thank you very much for coming back and being with us, and welcome.
Thank you, Stas, and thank you, the guests of this esteemed Propeller Club of North Carolina. I'd like to just take a minute really on Maritime Day, and our company and our group really honors the mariners for Maritime Day, and that's how we are proud to celebrate it, especially the folks that are working every day and sacrificing to keep the flow of goods commercially active. And then I'd like to thank Bill Pappy and his administration for the strong support of the U.S. flag fleet, and also the Biden administration's commitment to the Jones Act and the American mariners, as we saw and was expressed in Mr. Biden's presidency with his Made in America executive order. And we also thank Bill specifically for his support of the Port Infrastructure Development Program. It's crucial for development of the wind farming, which Jones Act operators are already investing in, which we've seen from Marjorie. Also, we're happy to hear about the recapitalization of the Ready Reserve Fleet bill. And if I may humbly drop a plug, if you select our proposal, we will exceed your expectations. Now to Pasha Hawaii. Pasha Hawaii operates 6 Jones Act vessels between the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii. We have 1 pure car and truck carrier. It typically carries about 1,800 automobiles and 1,000 square feet of heavy equipment to Hawaii. We have a container ro-ro vessel, carries about 1,100 automobiles and about 550 containers to Hawaii. We have 4 dedicated container ships. Each of those carry about 950 containers, and they go from the U.S. West Coast to Hawaii. So our whole maritime business in shipping is supporting Hawaii. With that, we are building 2 new vessels. These are LNG powered vessels. They're not only the clean energy vessels, but the most hydrodynamically efficient vessels, container vessels in the world today as far as design. The vessels are being built at Keppel Amfels in Brownsville, Texas. It's a proprietary design by Keppel's for us. And to help with the efficiency, Keppel's in Singapore optimized the hull using computational fluid dynamics. From there, they passed that hull on to ABS Group, who further optimized the hull. From there, it got passed along to the Maritime Research Institute of the Netherlands, who developed a propeller and a rudder to match the hull. From there, we added energy saving devices to see if we could further improve the performance of the hull, and we could not with any of the energy saving devices, which proves that the hull is as efficient as we can design it, or could be designed. So, very excited about those new ships. First one, sea trials next week. We'll come back to the shipyard and go through gas commissioning, which should take about 70 to 90 days. And we expect it to be in service the end of July in Long Beach for its first fueling. On the fueling side, we've developed a clean fueling company called West Coast Clean Fuels. It's a joint venture between World Fuel Services, Pasha, Hawaii, and Clean Marine Energy. We are our first customer. Contracts are all signed. We will be ready to fuel the ship on day one in Long Beach. We expect we'll fuel the ship every round trip. It'll take about 337,000 gallons of liquefied natural gas at each bunkering. We do have a second customer, the Switch Ferry. This is a hydrogen fueling, which will take place in San Francisco, and that should be coming this summer. So we're excited about that also. Moving on, just kind of the COVID impact of our business and our mariners. We got through 2020, and we're happy to say we're here. It was a tough struggle. Hawaii was down dramatically, especially visitors, which is a big portion of their industry, the tourism, and so it's a lot of their GDP. But back to the COVID. So COVID did affect our business and our mariners. We did have two ships that had positive cases. It's extremely disruptive. Initially, even with the symptomatic case, which you don't know at first if it's symptomatic, you are required to go to anchor. You're required to send people out by boat, disinfect the ship, renew the whole crew, and then you can come to port. We were the first to develop a working group with the Coast Guard in Long Beach, the CDC, and the Port of Long Beach Health Department. And collaboratively, we developed protocols, and they were accepted by all the stakeholders, including the ports and the pilots. And we were the first on the West Coast to be, if we had symptomatic persons on board, to be allowed to go to port. So that was really good. We're also facilitated vaccinations for our crew members. We were the first U.S. company to be able to do that. Queens Hospital in Hawaii was a partner. So starting January of this year, any crew member that wanted a vaccination, we've offered the transportation to and from the hospital and got them vaccinated. Also, now we're offering a cash bonus program. If you sign on our vessels and you are fully vaccinated, you immediately get a cash bonus. That's helping. We've been pretty fortunate on cases on board, or we do have pre-employment testing. This week we did have someone positive, but the rate of that positivity seems to be going down dramatically. And as a side note, the acceptance of the vaccine on board appears to be about just above 60%, which seems to be the kind of the national average. Moving on to Hawaii and the Jones Act, we heard from Bill about the importance nationally on the Jones Act, 670,000 jobs and 40,000 vessels and 154 billion impact. And when we bring that down to California, there's over 51,000 jobs in California directly related to the Jones Act. It produces 12.2 billion in economic impact for the local economy, and it generates 3.6 billion in worker income just in California. And then when we bring that to Hawaii, Hawaii is the Jones Act responsible for over 13,000 jobs, 787 million in workforce annual income, and $3.3 billion economic impact. So Jones Act's very important to California, Hawaii, and the nation. As you know, the Jones Act does take some heat. I don't think it's substantiated for increasing prices. You know, our new ships will amortize those over 40 years. We'll carry 1,000 containers a week on each one. So over 40 years, the cost per container is really minimal and cannot be counted in the Jones Act. In the Jones Act, increase of cost. Really, you know, I think Torey will substantiate this, but the transportation on island is very expensive in Hawaii. Hawaii does not, and I'm sure Puerto Rico, Hawaii does not have warehousing. Everything is just on time delivery. So we've invested and our competitors invested substantially in meeting the demands of Hawaii. These ships are very fast, 23 knots. So when our ships go, they leave Saturday morning, they arrive Wednesday afternoon. And by Thursday morning, those goods are at the storefront door, right? They're not stopping at a warehouse. So that kind of demand requires tremendous investment because we can't stack up containers. We have to get them there right away. So our investment just in Hawaii with the new container terminal, Kapalama Container Terminal, which is public-private, is just in the last 2 years, we're investing almost $1 billion in Hawaii. We won't leave that service. Where I would be critical, I think it would be critical if we allowed foreign flag operators into Hawaii, into that service. And right now, China is a lottery ticket if you can get a ship and bring cargo back. We would not leave Hawaii and go to China and abandon the people of Hawaii. I would question whether or not a foreign competitor would take advantage of those financial situations and disrupt the supply chain that is working very good now. So that's kind of my thoughts, and I want to thank everyone. If there's any questions after, I'm happy to answer them, Stas, but thank you for the time.
Ed, thank you very much. And we want to come back to you towards the end. Our next speaker is Nick Marrone, Vice President, Seafarers International Union. Nick, welcome. And what is the situation with our maritime labor?
Thank you, Stas, and good morning, everybody. Happy Maritime Day. It's truly a pleasure to be here with all of you on this special day. 101 years celebrating the Jones Act and the benefits of a U.S. flag maritime fleet. We are very busy in terms of potential jobs. We continue to recruit aggressively and actively to meet the challenges that we face now. The challenges of COVID has had some pretty big impact, not only here for U.S. flag carriers and United States merchant mariners, but on the worldwide scale is a bigger concern for those of us who are directly linked to the global supply chain and continuing to try and maintain on-time deliveries. The crew change crisis internationally continues to cause challenges. Based on industry analysis from the International Maritime Organization, the numbers of mariners requesting and requiring repatriation after having finished their contracts has declined from a high of 400,000 in 2020 to around 200,000 as of March of 2021, with a similar amount waiting to join ships. The crisis is far from over on issues basically surrounding the needs for vaccination for mariners needs to be resolved. Mariners worldwide should be designated as key workers to ensure priority vaccines and access to safe transit and travel. Fewer than 60 countries so far have heeded these IMO calls for seafarers to be designated as essential key workers. They must, and we must, continue to work together to develop relevant protocols and guidance around vaccine certification. This is particularly important as many barriers to travel created by national vaccine protocols will continue to complicate an already difficult situation. We must continue to work with our sister United Nations agencies, with industry bodies, and with governments to address these ongoing needs of seafarers and to educate or the important role seafarers have in this worldwide logistics chain. So as far as the seafarer goes, it's still a complicated world out there for us. We're very concerned that we're not given any kind of priority on a consistent basis. And our only hope is to do this through bodies such as the United Nations, so that we can bring a satisfactory solution to this challenge that all interested parties can buy into and feel confident that their countries would continue to remain safe from any potential COVID cases and any other future viruses that are going to be coming down the road. I'm sure this is not going to be the last time we're going to be dealing with a situation as we have here with our COVID-19 crisis. So we're going to continue to work hard. We appreciate everything that our American companies are doing and all the incentives they have to try and get our seafarers vaccinated. We do a lot on the union side in terms of education and incentives to get them to get vaccinated. Unfortunately, it's not a mandate at this time, and we continue to have to educate those that are a little bit fearful. On the positive side, I really appreciate the presentation by Foss. This is a new product for U.S. mariners and development of our offshore wind strategy. We feel very confident that American labor is going to play a role, as we have definitely had very good response from our administration in the White House with regards to keeping these jobs for American workers, and we'll be the ones to develop our offshore wind farms and maintain them, which is quite a great opportunity. Estimating upwards of 44,000 workers employed in this business, and a lot of that going with local communities who will have to maintain these generating stations on the shore side. Another program we're very excited about is our local congressman here, John Garamendi, has introduced a pro-maritime bill, which it's called the Energizing of America Act. And considering the better climate-related fuel changes, we're looking to have a role in export of LNG. And this Energizing American Shipbuilding Act would require that 15% of the total seaborne LNG exports by 2043 and 10% of the seaborne crude oil exports by 2035 be transferred on vessels built in the United States. And we're hoping that that will take hold in Congress so that we can continue to provide energy from our origin, worldwide distribution on American flag ships. We also have a program that's being considered for a tanker program similar to what the Maritime Security Program provides for dry cargo. These would be 10 additional tankers that would be part of the MSP fleet, because there is a shortage of available vessels to meet the Department of Defense needs with requirements for their distribution. So we have a pretty good positive outlook on where we stand. We're going to continue to play a very active role and a leadership role in maintaining Jones Act and expanding Jones Act, as we are a major party to that law, and we are the seafarers that are required. So with that, I want to thank again everybody for your time and for joining us today, and I'm available for any questions when they come. Thank you.
Nick, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it. And we will hold the questions till our last speaker, Torey Presti, who's president of National Shipping of America. Torey, good morning. And you, like us, are in the Bay Area. And welcome. And we look forward to your presentation. You're muted, Torey.
Not the first time.
Whoa, did you hear that? Did you?
That's my
hear that?
buddy.
All right, enough of that.
You know,
Enough of that. Okay.
Sicilians, you know, they're supposed to be family, but you know,
Go Bob. Okay.
All right.
All right. No, thank you, Stas. And thanks, Nick, as always. And the other Nick I see as well, Nick Salona and the SIU have done a fantastic job with us. We operate, as you know, Stas, one ship. It's a Jones Act vessel, a Jones Act endorsed vessel to call between Houston, Texas, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I'm happy to say we're in our 9th year. So that's been, it's been a struggle. It's a tough island. It's an island that's going through a lot of changes in the last 10, really 15 years. You have a shrinking population and a shrinking economy. And then the COVID hit, and that has been disastrous. You know, it's a country that relies on leisure and hospitality. It was hit particularly hard, much like Hawaii. I am proud to say 46% of the jobs lost last April in 2020 were recovered by October. This is versus 67% here on stateside. There is, the COVID is, we have been fortunate. We have with the protocol set in place, and we're fortunate to have mariners, both from Nick's group as well as the AMO, that have been extremely flexible and working with the restrictions set by the governments and the protocol set by the management companies. I have to give them compliments. Equally, shoreside, you forget you have the people stevedoring your ships, the ILA, and also maybe other non-union areas. They have been hit very hard by COVID. And I'm happy to say they have really stood up to that, and the cargo is continuing to flow. In fact, to your point, Stas, about the exporters in America, I think a lot of people don't realize that the Jones Act in 1920 basically empowered, I think it was called the U.S. Shipping Board at that time, which was a forerunner of the Federal Maritime Commission. But they've allowed them to empower if there's anything against exporters, that there's a prejudice or constraint of trade, that FMC will action that if there's enough requests. And I think that's gaining some steam right now. So they didn't realize the Jones Act is not only the cabotage of intercoastal and intracoastal waters, and it's not the rights and maintenance and cure of only seamen. It extends onshore. And they don't realize how powerful that this Jones Act is that was made in 1920. So are we going to build 15,000 TEU ships in America to support exports? I doubt it, frankly. So there are other ways to approach it, and the Jones Act empowers our government and the Federal Maritime Commission to follow that. Going back to Puerto Rico, you know, with the recent history, I'm actually a little bit bullish on Puerto Rico. There are about 5.7 million Puerto Ricans living in New York, Florida, and Texas. And there's 3.1 million living on the island. So we're seeing a dynamic trade start to begin. The classic one is the Goya beans, and they're selling. It's a tremendous trade, not only inbound, bringing tomato paste from California, but then manufacturing their products and sending them back to New York and Florida and Houston. And the president of Goya, this guy Bob Unami, is really continues to get the export award from our presidents, and is invited for better or for worse to the Rose Garden every year to celebrate that award. Still, though, the CDC does not recommend you travel to Puerto Rico at this time. There's 25% of the restaurants are closed. There was a spike in COVID cases, and so things are a little bit tough right now. But I do see things picking up. Okay, we're entering hurricane season, June 1st. But by November 1st, I think things are going to start rolling back to normal. Business is picking up. Volumes of cargo are picking up. FEMA has specified 4 warehouses on the island where they've awarded two vendors, so one being Crowley and one being Seva Logistics, to actually pre-position required things in case of a hurricane into these warehouses. So you have your ready-made meals, you've got your bottled water, you've got your blankets, and those will move and be mobilized by Jones Act carriers 4 to 5 days before the hurricane even hits. So they're getting ahead of the curve on that one. And again, I always stress the Jones Act carriers really should not be compared to global carriers. And by the way, they're not being compared recently with the freight rates being quoted eastbound at $10,000 or $8,000. The Jones Act rates look like bargains to Hawaii and Alaska and there. But moreover, we're a utility. I like to call us a utility. The people on the island need everything. They import everything and they need us. And as Ed said, when his ship leaves Saturday morning, he's got fresh produce in the Safeway there on Saturday morning and the next Saturday morning when everybody wants to shop. So people need to really compare us, the Jones Act carriers, to really being a utility. I'd like to be compared more to the railroads than I would to these global carriers. Short of the fact that we both float, and our similarities diverse from there. So all in all, I do think Puerto Rico will take there's a lot of money coming down right now. The $13.5 billion Trump actually let go is starting to trickle down, and we're seeing construction goods starting to flood the island. Auto sales are ahead of where they were pre-pandemic. So there is a little bit of a ray of hope there. And I can't dismiss the fact that the pharmaceuticals, Puerto Rico's been a huge pharmaceutical support. 10% of all the pharmaceuticals come out of Puerto Rico. With the pandemic and the fact that we don't make our PPEs and our safety equipment and all of our IVs, I think we're now with Biden's, Buy America, it's going to give them a little bit of a push, but it's going to take time. But all in all, Stas, that's really all I have to say. And I want to thank you and Bill Pape and everybody at the Propeller Club for hosting these. These are great. These annual things during annual events during Maritime Day. And I want to thank you very much.
Torey, we appreciate it. And it's good to get the update on Puerto Rico and hear that things are beginning to start coming back to life. I know that Puerto Rico was hit really hard and that they have a ways to go, and hopefully you'll have a moderate hurricane season.
Well, that's not what they're saying today. 16 to 20 named storms they're going to say this year. So be prepared. It's coming again, unfortunately. Things are crazy.
Well, and that is going to require a lot of support from operators like yourself, people like Pasha, like Foss. We need to maintain our waterborne capabilities just for these situations. I want to turn over to questions now. And I wanted to start with Bill Pape. And Bill, in the infrastructure bill, how does
Stas, Bill had to leave the call. Could you please repeat the question?
Okay. My question is, in terms of the infrastructure bill, is there more money for maritime?
Well, I mean, if you look at all the infrastructure bills, yes, we have now for the third year in a row our own dedicated maritime infrastructure bill, the Port Infrastructure Development Program, which this year is $230 million. We have averaged typically over the 10 years of Tiger and Build and now Raise, usually between 12 and 15% of the the overall bill size. So for example, for many years, it was averaging about $500 million, and we were receiving anywhere from $100 to $150 million in grants. Last year, when it was $1 billion, we brought in close to $150 million of grants. So right now we have a overall portfolio of discretionary grants over $2 billion, which is leveraging probably $5 to $6 billion in total infrastructure improvements here across the country. And that's just in ports and seaports.
Okay. And what is the situation with the Title 11 program? Bill said that it's been streamlined. How much has been allocated for loan guarantees?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we can certainly get you a number. And it is posted on our webpage, the number of applications that are available, that are open, and closed applications, as well as the total grants outstanding. Grants, I mean loans outstanding.
Okay, very good. One last question. Has there been any thought about the situation that we discussed and Torey referenced to about exporters and about the possibility that we should provide might provide some sort of support for U.S. exporters?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in policy circles in Washington. I read a media article today where the National Industrial League has proposed to Congress that they should enact some legislation. That was immediately countered by the World Shipping Council. So I anticipate you're going to see a rather robust legislative session here the rest of the summer as some of these issues come to the fore. But that's really for Congress to decide whether or not we should be modifying the Ocean Shipping Act of 1984.
Okay, thank you. Ed Washburn, what about us? I know our friends at Matson go to China. Is there any chance that you guys would develop the capability to go to Asia as well?
Potentially, Stas. I think we have chartered our ship in for 3 trips to China with Matson. Matson's one of our top 10 customers this year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we do not plan on developing a service to China.
Okay. And what is the capacity of the vessels that you are going to be putting into service? How big are they?
So dimensionally, they're 774 feet long and 115 feet wide. The capacity, different than nominal capacity, we specified container weights and sizes, and that was in our requirement. So, if you're going to compare it, it would be about a 3,400 TEU vessel. But because we're fully loaded departing US West Coast, our requirement was fully loaded, 1,200 containers at these specified weights, get to Hawaii without adjusting ballast or fuel, hence the wider vessel. But so for us, fully loaded containers typically averaged over 3-year weights, added a 15% margin, it'll carry 1,254 containers.
1,254 FEUs or TEUs?
Full containers, 40s and 45s.
Thank you. Very good. And the first vessel we're going to see showing up in Long Beach in, did you say June or July?
The end of July.
Very good. And so hopefully the experience with Keppel has been a good one.
The experience has been very good, Stas. They're home run in steel construction, coatings, piping. Where we've run into difficulty, and this is COVID related, and to put it in perspective, it was a little over a year ago that the shipyard, the Cameron County was shutting the shipyard down, and there was going to be nobody coming into the yard. The timing with us and our partnership with American Maritime Partnership, they happened to be have an opportunity to comment on a bill of essential workers, and with collaboration, we got shipyard workers included in that bill. And this was just days before our project was shutting down. And it managed to keep the shipyard open. But moving on to now, really where the problem is, as you know, a lot of the equipment on new build vessels and vessels built in the US is they're European made equipment. And the commissioning requires Europeans to travel to the US and commission that equipment. And that has been extremely problematic, getting people to the US or even the companies instigate or the companies working with us to get people here. So a lot of the companies just, we are not traveling to the US and we'll let you know when we will. So that's been somewhat troublesome. We're working through it and working through it successfully, but it has, I'd say overall, we have 3 to 4 months delay in vendors coming from Europe.
Okay. And one last question. What is the current situation with Hawaii and its economy? Are you back to normal or still below?
Yeah, it's very much below still. It is getting better. I think last year, or 2019, I have actually here as an example, but 2019 there was basically 90 million visitors, and 2020 there was 28 million visitors. And where that really comes into play with us is the expenditures of the visitors. And 2019 that went from almost 18 billion down to less than 5 billion. This year is expected to be right around 10 billion, so a gradual increase, but not full pre-pandemic recovery until 2024.
Whoa.
And that's really on the good side. On the automobiles, a lot of our business is bringing rental cars over to Hawaii. They defleeted during the pandemic. And now with the chip shortage, they're not able to refleet. So our automobile delivery business to Hawaii is extremely slow. As soon as the chip shortage gets resolved, we expect that to pick up dramatically.
So so if you go to Hawaii, do you have problems finding a car to rent?
I think if you go anywhere in the United States, you have problems finding a car right now.
Yeah, okay.
Hawaii is no exception.
Very good. Okay, Ed, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick, you referenced the younger people and the need for us to bring younger people into the maritime industry. And I know that you have a great facility at Piney Point, and I wondered, does the union see, what's the trend that the union sees in terms of young cadets coming into your facility and coming into the workforce? You've got to unmute, Nick. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. The pandemic really threw us a curveball. We had a nice stream of young men and women coming into the school, and we don't have any age discrimination either. As long as they can physically pass the Coast Guard medical exam and the requirements surrounding Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, they're welcome. But the pandemic really we had to shut the program down for a little bit. We had to really reduce the size of our classes. This was very upsetting to a lot of these people that were expecting to come in. During that period, their drug tests expired and they had to go get another one, and their physical expired and they had to pay for another one. And we lost a lot of people over this last year in 2020. Right now, unfortunately, there's so much competition out there that there's not a desiring need for these people to want to pursue this blue collar career. And we're finding that historically where we have been with the port cities, getting most of our people who are familiar with maritime from those locations, their opportunities are far greater, and we're reaching further into the inland areas of the United States to try and find interested young people that are looking to get out of the farmland communities. That's it in a nutshell. We compete with the 5 maritime academies. The more motivated young person wants to move right up to the officer level position and is not interested in taking the blue collar route and coming up the horse pipe as they used to. But we continue on. We're working with a lot of community groups. We work a lot with the state development agencies, and we'll be okay as long as we don't have a huge surge in a short period of time.
Very
huge.
good. Okay, Nick, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch my question to my friend in the Netherlands. Hans, if you're still there, I'd like to ask you, China is taking over more and more of the shipbuilding world. The bigger ships are being built in China. Is there a role for Europe and the United States to compete in the global container market on any level?
It's a good question, Stas. What we're seeing right now, of course, is still a dominance of European, mainly European shipping owners making orders. I mean, MSC, CMA, CGM have been on an ordering spree, as well as a couple of the classic Asian owners. But there is an influx of Chinese-owned vessels, mainly from operators like COSCO, that are starting to transport containers, but not only containers, but also being more heavily involved in, for instance, transporting goods for the wind industry. We've been seeing those heavy lift vessels coming in Rotterdam lately.
Okay. Hans, in terms of issues that that Marjorie referenced was the issue of alternative fuels. Does that offer a possibility that North American and European owners could start building hydrogen fuel cell or ammonia fuel cell vessels and take a market share of something going forward?
Well, that depends, of course, on how much you want to be in the forefront of this new technology. Knowing most of the ship owners tend to be somewhat conservative in their nature. They like to look at the other operators to see what they are doing and act upon that. And of course, LNG at the moment is at the forefront of being the most environmental technology available, certainly with bio LNG and synthetic LNG coming up as I think a serious contender for at least carbon neutral emissions. It's not to say zero emissions, because there will be emissions. And from what we've been hearing lately on both methanol and ammonia is that these technologies have not ripened to the stage that they could be implemented in a broader scale as LNG is being implemented right now.
Okay.
So
and you have traveled extensively to China. How do you compare? Would you say that they are, in terms of quality, as competitive as Korea, Japan, and anybody else?
It's hard to compare them in terms of quality. I'd say the Korean yards are still ahead of the game. They're the absolute top in terms of quality. But the Chinese are narrowing that gap quite quickly. And certainly, if you look at the ships types they are building right now, is that on most of the ship types there is no true lead anymore. Let's say, for instance, European yachts, the only ship type that may exclusively come from Europe is the large cruise vessels. Although cruise vessels are being built in China, but those are exclusively meant for the Chinese market.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time for one or two more questions. Does anybody in the audience have a question of our panelists? You can either send me a chat or you can open up and ask your question. Do not see, now I see somebody from the Coast Guard in my screen here. Would you like to introduce yourself, Captain? Can't hear you yet. You're still on mute.
How's that, sir? Is that better? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stas, for the opportunity to introduce myself. I am Captain Jordan Baldueza. I am the new Deputy Sector Commander here at Sector San Francisco. I relieved Captain Howard Wright as of May 7th. So I'm brand new to the job and excited to be a part of the wonderful team. And thank you for allowing me to participate in Happy Maritime Day to everyone.
Captain, we welcome your participation. Thank you very much for being here today. We look forward to having you at other Propeller Club events. And where was your last posting?
Yes, sir. I was at Sector Houston Galveston in Texas. I was the response department head there. And yes, sir. But excited to be here. This is actually my second time in my Coast Guard career to be in the Bay Area. I did my first 5 years in the Coast Guard right here in Alameda.
Very good. Captain, welcome. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question from Laura Covery. Laura, I just saw the question and then it disappeared. Hold on a second. Is anyone familiar with the grant requirements for the Maritime Center for Excellence funding? Jeff, Captain Jeff, are you still with us?
I am.
Are you familiar with the grant requirements for the Maritime Center for Excellence funding?
Well, we had a press release that came out today on the Centers of Excellence that were designated. I don't believe we have developed a notice of funding opportunity yet for the grant funds. So I want to introduce our new Gateway Director, Gus Hine. He should still be on the call here, but as soon as we do get that notice out, we will distribute it to everybody and get it out to the community. And we anticipate there's going to be a significant response to that this year.
Okay.
It'll be the first time we do it.
If you could send us a copy notice when it comes out, we would appreciate that.
Certainly. And I'll forward you the press release here today as well.
Thank you very much. Gus, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Stas. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gus Hine, and I'm going to be the new Gateway Director for the Mid-Pacific region for the U.S. Maritime Administration. I'm very thrilled to be in the position and look forward to working with you all. I'm a former executive officer to the board at the Port of Long Beach and a maritime consultant doing international business development for the last 13 years or so, as well as a Naval Reserve officer. So I appreciate the introduction and look forward to working with you all.
Very good. Gus, when you get your new email, will you make sure I get it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Because you had an AOL one, and I know that on Monday that's going to change.
I expect it to. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stas.
So I want to do a short thank you for everyone who is on the call today. Maritime Day, as you know, is tomorrow. In spite of COVID, I hope that we are going to be able to move forward. I think we're hearing from the presentation that we saw from Marjorie at Foss and from the responses that we got from some of our panelists that there are new markets developing for offshore wind. And sadly, as Torey implied, we may be doing more emergency services work if hurricanes continue to be a problem on our coastal and island communities. I want to congratulate our friends at Pasha that our ships are finally showing up here. And I know it's been a long haul, Ed, but we are very, very glad to see new ships anytime we can. Brother Marrone, I'm an honorary Sicilian because you will remember that 2,000 years ago, the Greeks colonized Sicily and provided you with some additional dimensions that you didn't have before. Of course, you beat us at Syracuse and kicked our backsides back to Greece, but you know, we'll pass on that one. In any case, Nick, thank you very much for your participation. The Seafarers are the backbone of our Jones Act. And all of our mariners, whether they are union or not, they should be union if they can be union. And we hope that you will see more participation. I believe that the maritime industry is the future. I think we're going to be doing a lot of work offshore with wind. And also, we didn't talk about this, but transmission lines. And we are in the process of getting Dr. Habib Dagar, who is at the Director of Material Science at the University of Maine, who developed the first floating offshore wind turbine. And I hope that we will have him speak to us in June and talk about opportunities, one of which is that the University of Maine built through a 3D process a small motorboat about 20 feet long in 72 hours. So Hans, if you're listening, maybe we will be back out there with something as a surprise for our good friends on the other side of the pond. With that, I want to thank you all very much for coming. And Captain Jeff, thank you very much for your participation. We look forward to working with you and the Maritime Administration. We need a $1 billion loan guarantee program for shipbuilding to really get things started. And I know we're not there, but I think we need to start thinking about that. Peter Dreyfus, I know that you are here somewhere. He is part of a team that has built a new dredger that is a one-person operation. There's going to be a lot of dredging in the future, especially with nature-based solutions. And I hope that that will be part of the package. And there you are, Peter. You want to just say hi for just a second there?
Hi, Stas. Forgive my lateness. We just drove up here, but in Michigan, near Sheboygan, we are manufacturing a 40-foot dredger called the Watermaster, and bringing a lot of welding jobs to Upper Michigan. And we just sold our first copy of this Finland-engineered marvelous machine called the Watermaster AMD 5000. We just sold it to the state of New York. They've been doing ice breaking on the Mohawk River, and they're going to be doing suction dredging up and down. And we have about 5 other sales in the pipeline.
Very good. Now, you remember you are about an hour's drive away from me, and I offered to have you come for lunch, and I expect when your busy schedule allows that you'll honor my invitation.
What time is lunch?
I'll let you know.
Okay. Thanks. Always hungry.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Great. Thank you.
And with that, everyone, thank you very much. Happy Maritime Day. We look forward to a more robust maritime industry next year. There are a lot of challenges. As several people have referenced, the Biden administration's infrastructure initiative provides some opportunities that we need to take advantage of. Jeff, I still like my idea of the 1 billion loan guarantee program. And maybe we can get some attention on that. And then Nick will have somebody to start putting on ships. So, on that note, all of you have a good weekend. Have a good Maritime Day. You are the backbone of the Jones Act and of the Merchant Marine. And we are very grateful for your service. Thank you all very much. And we will see you soon.